The summer sun was gentle that day, soft and golden over Pasadena. It wasn't too hot, just warm enough to feel lazy. The air was quiet, broken only by the light sound of water from the plaza fountain and children laughing in the distance. It was a peaceful afternoon. The kind of day where nothing bad was supposed to happen. The kind of day where the world felt safe. Kaya Seagal, 17 years old, sat quietly on the edge of the fountain. She wore a white cotton skirt that reached just above her knees and a light blue hoodie with the sleeves pushed up. She had her earbuds in, listening to soft music. Her legs were crossed, and she sipped a cold strawberry smoothie through a pink straw. Her black tote bag rested beside her, filled with a few books she had just bought at the small bookstore nearby. Kaya didn't like crowds. She didn't like attention either. Even though she was the daughter of a famous man, Steven Seagal, she tried to stay away from the spotlight. She enjoyed quiet days like this. No cameras, no reporters, no noise. Just music, books, and the comfort of knowing her father would pick her up soon. She glanced at her phone. 4:42 p.m. "Dad's always on time," she whispered with a soft smile. She looked around the plaza. A mother was helping her toddler into a stroller. A couple of teens were eating frozen yogurt. A few older folks were walking slowly, chatting quietly. It all felt normal, calm. But a few feet away, just past the curb of the parking lot, a black and white patrol car pulled in and parked crooked across two spaces. It wasn't an emergency stop. The lights weren't on, but the way it rolled in, slow, confident, careless, made it feel like a warning. Inside the car sat two officers. Deputy Ron Hale was the older one, maybe in his early 40s. His face looked tired, his eyes cold, and his greasy mustache twitched every time he sipped from his coffee cup. Next to him was Officer Jeff Kroger, younger and louder, with a loud mouth and an even louder ego. He leaned back in the passenger seat, one foot resting on the dash. They were known in the area, not for being helpful, not for keeping the streets safe, but for something else. Girls whispered about them. Families warned their daughters to stay away from that patrol car. There had been complaints, too many, but none of them had stuck. Nothing ever did. Ron Hale took another sip of his coffee and pointed with his chin. "Look at that one." Jeff leaned forward and whistled softly. "White skirt, long legs. That one?" Hale nodded. "She's just sitting there, probably waiting for someone. Let's see what she's up to." "Sure," Jeff said with a crooked grin. "Maybe she needs police protection." The doors opened. Two pairs of black boots stepped out onto the pavement. They walked slow, like they had all the time in the world. Kaya didn't notice them at first. Her music was still playing. She was watching the water dance in the fountain, lost in thought. Then the shadow fell over her. She looked up, pulling one earbud out. Her eyes narrowed a little. Two men in uniform, smiling but not kindly. "Hey there, miss," Ron said in a voice that tried to sound friendly. "You okay? You've been out here a while." Kaya blinked, confused. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just waiting for my dad." Jeff looked around, pretending to scan the area. "All by yourself? That's not very safe." Kaya shifted a little. "This is a public place." Ron took a small step closer. "Well, some of us are just doing our duty, making sure everything's proper." She stood up. Her heart beat a little faster. Something about the way they stood, the way they smiled, it made her stomach twist. "I'm okay, really," she said firmly. But Ron didn't back away. He tilted his head. "You sure that skirt isn't breaking any rules?" Kaya froze. "What?" Jeff chuckled. "Yeah, it's riding a little high. Don't want the city thinking we don't enforce dress codes." Kaya's face turned red. Her hands shook slightly. "Leave me alone," she said. And then it happened. Ron Hale reached out and, without warning, flicked the hem of her skirt upward with two fingers. Kaya gasped and jumped back, slapping his hand away. "What are you doing?" she cried. Her voice was sharp, scared, and full of rage. People nearby turned. A couple paused. A few stared, but no one moved. Jeff laughed. Relax, it was just a joke. Kaya backed away, her eyes now wide, her chest rising and falling with panic. She reached into her hoodie pocket, pulled out her phone, and tried to unlock it with shaking fingers. But before she could even press the screen, a voice boomed from behind. Kaya! It wasn't loud like shouting. It was low, heavy, like thunder, rolling down a mountain. It froze the air. It stopped every sound in the plaza. The officers turned, and so did Kaya. 10 feet away, dressed in black from head to toe, stood a man like a shadow made of steel. His arms were folded across his broad chest, his face calm, but his eyes burned. Steven Seagal had arrived. Kaya dropped her phone. Her legs moved on instinct. She ran to him. He caught her in one arm, wrapping her close, never taking his eyes off the two men. What happened? He asked softly, like a storm before lightning. Kaya's voice broke. He lifted my skirt. He touched me. Steven's jaw tightened. The calm in his face broke for a moment, just long enough to see the rage underneath. He gently moved Kaya, behind him. Go sit in the car, he said. Kaya hesitated, then nodded and walked toward the black SUV nearby. The plaza was now silent. Steven took one step forward. The real story was about to begin. Steven Seagal stood still like a mountain. His feet didn't move, but his presence did. It filled the space, sucked out the heat, and made the air heavy. The sunlight behind him gave his figure a dark outline, like a warrior from an old legend. Every eye in the plaza turned toward him. Some people held their breath. Others lifted their phones. Ron Hale and Jeff Kroger were still standing, but their fake smiles had faded. Their shoulders tensed. Their mouths opened slightly, but no words came out. Steven's eyes didn't blink. His voice was low, almost calm. What did you do to my daughter? Kaya had already reached the car. She sat inside, door half open, watching her father. Her face was pale, her hands still shaking. But she felt safer now. Steven Seagal wasn't just a famous man. He was her father, and when he arrived, everything changed. Hale raised his hands, trying to act peaceful. Sir, this is a misunderstanding. Kroger added quickly. We were just checking on her. We didn't mean. Steven cut them off with one step forward. His boots touched the stone path. You think lifting a girl's skirt is nothing? He asked, still calm. You think touching a child is funny? Kroger's voice cracked. She's not a child, she's almost an adult. Steven's eyebrows twitched just a little, but that was enough. Ron Hale's voice shook now. Look, man, it wasn't like that. It was just a little joke, all right? Another step forward. Steven's shadow now covered both men. You touched my daughter, he said again, slower this time. In public, on duty, with your badge on your chest. And now you want to talk. About jokes? Hale tried to laugh, but it came out like a cough. It's not what you think. I was just... Suddenly, Steven's fist moved. It was so fast most people didn't even see it. But the sound of it, flesh meeting bone, knuckles cracking into skin, echoed through the plaza like a clap of thunder. Ron Hale flew backward, his body smashed into a nearby SUV. His head hit the window with a loud crack before he crumpled to the ground, blood pouring from his nose. He didn't get up. Kroger screamed, pulling his baton from his belt. He raised it, but Steven was already there. One hand grabbed the baton midair. Another twist, smooth and perfect, and the bone in Kroger's wrist snapped like a dry stick. Kroger dropped to his knees, gasping in pain. Steven leaned close, his voice like a whisper carried by fire. You touch my family, he growled. You. Face me. Kroger looked up, sweat pouring down his face. His body shook. I didn't mean, please. But Steven didn't need to say more. By now, people were filming. Every phone in the plaza was up, cameras rolling. Some had caught the first words, others had caught the punch. Everyone was recording now. A woman in a pink yoga top was already on the phone with 911. Yes, officers assaulted a young girl, she said firmly. And her father stopped them. No, not a fight, self-defense. Everyone saw it. Another man pointed. That guy, he flicked her skirt. It was disgusting. She screamed, then Seagal showed up. Jeff Kroger was still on the ground, cradling his broken wrist. His lips trembled. You're gonna get sued, he whispered. Steven didn't even look at him. He walked back to the car. Kaya was still sitting there, eyes full of confusion and fear. She looked at him with 1,000 questions in her heart. Are they going to get away with it? She asked, her voice small. Steven knelt down to her level. His voice was calm again. Not this time, he said. Suddenly, sirens filled. The Air 2 police cruisers arrived fast. Their lights were flashing, but there was no need for drama. The scene was already calm, at least on the outside. The inside was a storm. Sergeant Elena Reyes stepped out of the first car. She was tall, strong, with dark hair pulled into a bun. Her sharp eyes scanned the crowd. She saw Hale unconscious. She saw Kroger on his knees. She saw Seagal standing like a wall between his daughter and the world. And she saw the phones. All of them. What the hell happened? She asked as she approached. Steven said nothing at first. He simply nodded toward the people. A woman handed her phone to Sergeant Reyes. She watched the video. First the officers smiling, then Kaya backing away, then the flick of the skirt. Her jaw clenched. Steven finally spoke. Those two harassed my daughter. One of them touched her. I reacted. A younger officer moved forward, handcuffs in his hand. We should take him in. Don't, Reyes said quickly. But Sergeant, I said don't. She turned back to Steven. Sir, I'll need you and your daughter to come down to the station. Just statements for now. But from what I see, those men crossed a serious line. Kaya nodded slowly and stepped out of the car. Her voice was a little stronger now. He said I looked suspicious. Then they made fun of my skirt. Then he just touched me. Steven added softly. I did what any father would. Reyes nodded. Understood. By now the paramedics had arrived. Hale was taken away on a stretcher. Kroger was handcuffed, not because of Steven, but because the sergeant had already made her decision. This goes above my pay grade now, she said quietly. Internal Affairs is going to want everything. Steven and Kaya were led gently into a separate cruiser. Not as criminals, but as witnesses. Back at the plaza, the crowd slowly broke apart, but the internet was already burning. Videos were being uploaded. Hashtags were being typed. A justice for Kaya was already trending. People weren't just angry, they were awake, and far from the cameras in the back of that quiet police cruiser, Kaya reached for her father's hand. You were fast, she said softly. Steven didn't smile, but he held her hand gently. You called me, he said. And I was never far. The war hadn't ended, it had only begun, but now the world was watching. The downtown police station was buzzing. Officers moved quickly, voices low, eyes tense. Reporters had already gathered outside. News vans blocked half the street. The story had spread like wildfire. By the time Steven and Kaya walked into the front lobby, half the country had already seen the video. The officer at the desk looked up and froze. Mr. Seagal, Miss Seagal, Captain Mooney is waiting for you. Steven gave a small nod. His hand was gently resting on Kaya's back, guiding her forward. She looked tired, pale, but she walked tall. She had cried in the car, but now her face was calm, just like her father's. They followed the officer down the hall to a quiet room with a long table. Inside sat Captain Darren Mooney. He was a large man in his late 50s with gray hair and a strong voice. But when Steven and Kaya entered, even he stood up out of respect. Please sit, he said. They sat. Mooney didn't waste time. I've already seen the video, and I want you both to know. I believe you. Kaya looked up, surprised. You do? Yes? Mooney said simply. We've had whispers about those two before. Complaints. Most didn't go far. But now, the proof is clear. What they did to you was wrong. It was disgusting. Steven's eyes narrowed. And what are you going to do about it? Mooney took a deep breath. I've placed both officers under suspension without pay. Internal Affairs has opened a full investigation, and the district attorney has already requested the footage. Kaya stayed quiet, her hands in her lap. She was trying to stay strong, but her voice cracked. They laughed at me like I didn't matter, like I was just a thing. Mooney leaned forward, his voice softened. I'm a father too. And what you said matters. Your courage matters. You weren't just hurt, Kaya. You were disrespected by men who wore this badge. Steven's voice was low and sharp. They touched my daughter. I don't care if they wore a badge or a crown. There's no excuse. I agree. Mooney replied. But we have to follow the rules. We'll press charges. We'll go by the book. And you both need to give your full statements today. Kaya nodded slowly. Her voice steadied. I want to tell everything. As she spoke, officers outside worked to calm the growing crowd. Protesters had arrived. Women held signs. Protect, not harass. No badge for abuse. The video had gone viral. On social media, thousands of people were speaking out. Women of all ages shared stories of being harassed, ignored, or laughed at by officers. Steven's name trended online, not just because he was famous, but because of what he said. You mess with her, you mess with me. News anchors repeated it. Artists painted it. People chanted it in the streets. That night, Kaya sat on the living room couch, legs tucked under her. The TV was on, showing news from the plaza. She held a cup of tea. Her fingers were still trembling. Steven sat beside her. No words at first, just quiet support. Dad, she said finally, what if they still get away with it? Steven looked at her. They won't. How do you know? Because the world saw it, he said. And the world is angry. Not just for you. For every girl who was touched, mocked, or silenced. Kaya leaned her head against his shoulder. I was scared. Steven rested his hand gently on her hair. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. Speaking out while scared, that's what makes you strong. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Steven Seagal floors cop after daughter's skirt lifted in sick public stunt. Pasadena police under fire after video shows teen, girl harassed. At the precinct, phones rang nonstop. City leaders held emergency meetings. The mayor released a statement supporting Kaya and calling for a full review of officer conduct. Meanwhile, more women began speaking up. Anonymous tips flooded the hotline. Past encounters with Deputy Hale and Officer Kroger came to light. Stories of pulled-over teenagers, inappropriate comments, silent threats. 2 days later, a press conference was held. Steven and Kaya stood before a sea of cameras. Kaya wore a simple white blouse. No makeup, no drama. Just her. Her voice was clear. I was sitting alone, waiting for my dad. 2 officers came up to me. They smiled like friends. Then one of them touched me. He lifted my skirt. And they laughed. The room went silent. They didn't see me as a person. Just something to tease, something to touch, but I'm more than that. And I'm not scared anymore. Steven stepped forward, his arm wrapped around his daughter. His face was calm, but behind his eyes was steel. This isn't about being famous, it's about being a father. If someone touches your child, you don't stay silent. And if they can do this in daylight, imagine what happens in the dark. The audience clapped. Some cried. Others stood in quiet respect. That same night, the district attorney filed formal charges. Assault, harassment, abuse of power, lewd conduct on a minor. Both officers were arrested. Their badges were taken, their weapons removed. They were no longer the law. Kaya watched it all unfold. But she didn't smile. She didn't cheer. This wasn't just about me, she whispered to her dad. It's bigger now. Steven looked at her with quiet pride. You didn't just stand up, he said. You stood tall. For the first time in days, Kaya smiled. A small smile, but real. Because in a world that often silenced girls like her, she had found her voice, and she had used it. 2 weeks later, the courtroom was packed. Cameras lined the hallway. Reporters whispered into microphones. Protesters stood outside holding signs, some with Kaya's face printed above the words, "She spoke for us all." Inside, the air was tight and serious. At the front of the courtroom sat Ron Hale and Jeff Kroger. Both wore gray suits instead of uniforms. Both looked tired, pale, and very different from the arrogant men who had once laughed in a plaza. Across the aisle sat Kaya, dressed in a simple blue dress. Her hair was tied back. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked calm, but not small. She had learned how to sit tall. Next to her sat Steven Seagal wearing a black suit. His arms were, still, his eyes were sharp. He hadn't come to fight this time, not with his fists, but with truth. The judge entered. The courtroom stood, then sat again. The trial was quick, because the facts were clear. The video had been played more than 100 times across the country. It showed everything. Kaya sitting alone. The officers smiling. The moment Hale flicked up her skirt. The scream. The silence. And finally, Steven arriving, fists ready, justice sudden. Now Kaya was asked to speak. She stood. Everyone turned. "My name is Kaya Seagal," she said clearly. "I'm 17 years old. I was alone that day waiting for my dad. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't break any law. But 2 men in uniform decided I was something to play with." Her voice didn't shake. She kept going. "They touched me. They laughed. They thought I wouldn't speak. But I did. Because if I stayed silent, maybe the next girl would think she had to be silent too. I don't want that. No one should feel powerless." She paused, looked directly at Hale and Kroger. "When you laughed, I felt small. But today I'm not small. Not anymore." The courtroom was quiet. The judge nodded slowly, then looked to the 2 former officers. Ron Hale lowered his head. Jeff Kroger blinked fast, his eyes glassy. The weight of their choices was finally hitting them. Not just the pain they caused, but the movement they helped spark. The judge's voice was strong. "Deputy Ron Hale and Officer Jeff Kroger, this court finds you guilty of misconduct, harassment, assault, and abuse of authority. You are hereby stripped of your law enforcement rights and banned from all future public service." He looked at Kaya. "Miss Seagal, your bravery speaks louder than any badge ever could." Outside, the news was already spreading. Hale and Kroger found guilty. Justice for Kaya. Seagal daughter's courage sparks national reform talks. From pain to power, a teen stand against abuse. On social media, thousands shared their own stories. Women from all over the country wrote about times they had been harassed or ignored. Now they were inspired to speak too. The hashtag #ItIsKayaSpeaks climbed to the top of global trends. At the same time, Pasadena's police department began new programs. Officers were placed under new review systems. Sensitivity training was made mandatory. A new civilian oversight board was formed to track misconduct reports. Real change had begun. But back at home, Kaya didn't care about news or headlines. She sat curled up on the couch, a warm blanket over her shoulders. The house was quiet. No camera crews, no police, no screaming crowds. Just peace. Steven walked in carrying a tray. On it was a mug of chamomile tea and a bowl of warm cookies. He set it on the table, then sat beside her. "You did something big?" he said softly. Kaya smiled. "I was terrified." Steven shook, his head gently. "And still you stood up. That's bravery." Kaya looked down at her hands. "Do you think it'll last? All the changes, the rules, the new systems?" Steven looked at her with calm eyes. "It already started. You opened the door. Now others are walking through it." She sipped her tea, then leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thanks for being there." Steven didn't smile much, but his hand rested gently on her back. You Didn't need me to fight this time. You fought with your words. And that's stronger than any punch. The television played in the background. Another news anchor talked about justice. A clip of Kaya's speech in court played again. Outside, lights from passing cars flickered across the windows. But inside, the home felt warm. Safe. 2 days later, a special interview aired. Kaya sat in a quiet studio, wearing a soft sweater. Her hands in her lap, the reporter asked, "What do you want people to remember most about what happened?" Kaya answered, "That silence helps no one. That fear is real, but speaking out is power. If something bad happens to you, say something, tell someone. You're not alone." Then she added quietly, "I'm not just Steven Seagal's daughter. I'm my own person, and I have a voice." People clapped. Across the internet, support poured in again. Celebrities, activists, teachers, mothers. Everyone shared her message. The courtroom had given her justice. But the world gave her something more. Respect. A week later, the police department invited Kaya to a special youth safety council. They wanted her voice. They wanted her story to help teach others. She agreed. Not because she wanted fame, but because she knew it could protect someone else. The girl who once sat alone by a fountain, afraid and frozen, had now become a symbol of strength. Not because she was famous, not because of her last name, but because she had been brave. At home, Steven watched her prepare for the meeting. She wore a white skirt again, the same style she wore that day. But this time, she wasn't nervous. She stood tall in front of the mirror, adjusted her blouse, and smiled. Steven watched from the doorway. "You ready?" he asked. Kaya turned. "I've never been more ready." He gave her a proud nod. "Let's go." And as they walked out the door, the world waited. Not for a fight, not for a scandal, but for the young woman who had turned fear into power and pain into change. Because the cops may have tried to lift her skirt that day, but she had lifted a movement.